Welcome to a new episode of Opening Bid. I'm Yahoo Finance Executive Editor Brian Sozzi. This is the podcast that will make you a smarter investor and a more well-rounded investor. Really excited about our next topic here. It is all things humanoid robots and what that future may look like. Let's bring in Rob Garlick, Head of Innovation, Technology, and Future of Work at Citi Global Insights, and his partner on this really interesting latest piece of research, Wenyan Fei, over at Citi Global Insights as well, where he's an analyst. Good to see you both. Really enjoyed this piece of research. Rob, let me start with you here. And you guys come out of the gate blasting with this. Robots are no longer confined to sci-fi. Walk us through this.
Well, look, it's been a bit of a journey, truthfully. I mean, robots are hardly new, but there's a number of new developments that are happening. Artificial intelligence, probably the most important. And in 2022, we did a report on large language models and all the innovation happening in AI. We kind of thought about, well, what's next? And we did last year a report on AI agents. And then people keep saying to us, what's next? And so we lifted the cover on robots and found there is so much activity and so much innovation and development that's taking place. And, you know, the humanoid, well, we did two reports on robots, candidly. One was on kind of lots of different moving robots, which we can talk about. And then we did a follow on humanoids. And on the humanoids, we started to think, okay, well, how many players are out there? And we found there are over 50 different humanoids in development. So when I say this has gone from, you know, sci-fi to development and about to kind of launch into something very big, we're just basically reporting what we were seeing. And then what we did in the report was we tried to sort of dimension it and say, how big could this get? Which I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation.
Yeah, important point there real quick to the Yahoo Finance community. There are more people involved in this space than Tesla CEO Elon Musk making humanoid robots. Very important point by Rob there. Wenyan, let me go to you. How big, before we get into some of the companies trying to change the game here and what these robots do and what they don't do, how big of a market opportunity is humanoid robots looking out over the next few decades?
So basically, we built a model to set the market because we heard different market sizing for humanoids. Some are really big and some are really small, but we want to get to our own proprietary model. So we modeled 7 different use cases for humanoids based on the market that we think are going to be the biggest in the future. So we modeled home services like those robots doing the laundry, mowing the lawn, and we sized the industry market whereby the humanoid robots working in factories and warehouses. And we also do construction, parcel delivery, food and grocery delivery, supermarkets, hotels, like basically every big market that we included. And the number that we got to is 30 million in unit number by 2035 and 650 roughly by 2050 is the number that we got to in terms of unit. And if you multiply by the pricing point that we are currently looking at is around 20 to 30K US dollars, and we are expecting it to gradually goes down a little bit in the future, but I think by 2050, we are looking at a $7 trillion market for humanoid.
Rob, robots that can mow your lawn? What are we talking about here? A human-looking robot that is actually pushing a lawnmower? Like, how far away are we from that?
Well, look, the penetration of cleaning robots in the home in the US is already 20%. Okay, these like robots that go around and vacuum or mop your floor.
Oh, I love my Roomba. Big Roomba fan.
Yeah, there you go. And look, there are multiple different varieties of those. I mean, one video kind of samples 94 different versions of that. So it's not that you necessarily need a humanoid to try and change that, or a humanoid to, substitute for your robot lawnmower that you might already have or not. So you've got to be careful around the fact that just because a humanoid can do something doesn't mean that they should do something. But there are plenty of things that we think that they can do that are going to be useful for you. And so, for example, I mean, actually just a very live example, a friend of mine is just visiting his mother, who is really having, she's in her 80s, she's having some real difficulty. He can't be there very much of the time. He lives abroad and travels abroad a lot. To be able to have something a robot that will be able to help lift things, lift her, for example, would be extremely useful. So you've got to be careful around just because something can do so doesn't mean it's the right thing to do so. But at the same time, one of the things that is interesting about humanoids, when people say, well, why should we even have them, is that our man-made world that we've built, whether it is our homes or our factories or our shop floors or everything else, are built for humans. And so fitting humanoids into that without needing more infrastructure is a relatively easy thing to do. And also their versatility to be able to do things for you can also be really useful as well.
Rob, now you have me thinking like, at some point, I may have to care for my aging parents. And it's something I've never done before. But maybe I just program this humanoid and let them take care of them. We're at the point where these robots could actually lift humans, and what does the AI look like here?
Well, the AI is a really important facet because, as I said, robots have been around for years, and we went from industrial robots to cobots, and things behind cages to things were whizzing around factory floors or warehouses, whatever else it might be. But in terms of making them useful for lots of different noisy environments, AI has now developed to a point where actually we can have a conversation using natural language processing previously and now large language models and foundation models to be able to have a two-way conversation. You can take that and put it into coding to be able to codify the actions that you want them to be able to do. They obviously are able to see, and I think it's pretty remarkable, just as an example, and you take a step back. We wrote our first Car of the Future report in 2014, thinking about autonomous driverless vehicles. And yes, it's a long time coming for different reasons like safety and regulation, etc. But the reality is you can now have moving robots going at 70 miles an hour around the streets in certain places. So it's not too much of a leap to think, well, if you can move from there to be able to move to, less noisy, easier to navigate environments, that they can be very useful. But this AI component is really critical. And one of the things people talk about in AI is now we have the ability to have multimodal AI. So rather than just discrete units of this is great at vision, this is great at language, etc., this is great at coding actions, you're able to then bring them all together. And that's what turns them from, quite frankly, being potentially more useless to being more useful.
Wenyan, your $7 trillion market potential note by 2050, what are some of the challenges to reaching that? I imagine manufacturing robots on this scale might be one of them.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the challenges is that we don't have the scale of production right now. A lot of those parts for those humanoids, for those humanoid producers, they're just 3D printing all of the parts. I think one of the hindrance would be we need to build the production line for that, and also the the way that I like to think about this is that AI is the brain of humanoids, and then we need to train the AI in the real world in order for them to learn how to perform specific tasks. And in order to train them, we want to have the data for them, but we are running out of data. Data is really important. I think a lot of so one of the infrastructure that you can invest in is data centers, because it really powers the training of AI. So data would be one of the barriers, and now is currently roughly 20% of human efficiency, and it still continue to learn. It developed really fast, but we need some time in order to get to a world where the efficiency of humanoid is like 100% or 200% of human to reach that substitution ratio of 1 to 2 to 1.
You mentioned, Wenyan, in the report that one of the biggest opportunities for humanoids is well, I'll list them here. It's home services, industrials are key, delivery. Why home services? Like what do you think a humanoid will end up doing?
I think the biggest area for is really home services, is because we've got a huge number, 3 billion households in the world, and based on the survey that we saw, 70% of the homes in the world they're potentially willing to adopt, but obviously there are differences by development in different areas. So we segment the geography into more developed areas, less developed areas, and least developed areas, and we apply a very conservative number for the even though we apply a very conservative number, we still get a very huge unit number. So what they can do is they can do a lot of things. You've already got the robot cleaner in your home mopping your floor, and they can do the laundries, they can make you a cup of tea, they can mowing the lawns, and they can take care of the elderly people that you don't need to send your grandparents or parents to the care home. You can just take care of them at home. I think this is one of the biggest use cases, actually.
That's just wild. I just program my robot. They can take care of my mom or dad. They can just serve them food. They can call them. Maybe because I don't have to call them. Maybe they can even do that. You know, Rob, before we go to break, part of your title is future of work. And as I'm listening to hearing you speak, I have to imagine these humanoids are going to change how work is done in a big way. Like I might be sitting here with my arm around like Ryan Sazi the robot, and maybe we're having a four-way discussion. I mean, what impact do you think this will have on the U.S. labor force, if not the world labor force?
So the answer could be very significant. And one of the things that was a real surprise to us, even though this is pretty simple maths, Brian, is the payback period for these humanoids could be very, very short indeed. So one of the things we do, I mean, you mentioned Musk and Tesla's Optimus. You know, there's a different price band for that between $20 and $30,000. But let's call it 25 for argument's sake. But you take that and you say how many hours a day and then a week can it work? Put it on US minimum wages, the lowest of which is $7.25, and we get to a 36-week payback period. So the economic opportunity of this could be enormous and massive cost savings for businesses that use it. So you and Wenyan just discussed home services, and that potentially could be the biggest market. But the first market will be in industrial settings because there is an economic substitution potentially that can go with those very attractive payback periods and the fact that robots, don't take sick leave and don't take holidays and all that type of stuff. Now, back to your question on the future of work and what it means. I mean, it's not clear the substitution rate that you should use. We had an assumption of a 1-for-1 substitution. But let's say these robots are working 23 hours a day, which is possible. Should you use a 3-for-1 substitution rather than a 1-for-1? And taking tractors as an example, because, we look back in history and you can see the fact that, the tractor didn't just substitute for one aggregate worker or one horse. I mean, in fact, the biggest tractor these days has a 760 horsepower. Okay, so in theory, they're substituting for a lot. There's also some fantastic work previously. We've seen that in robots, industrial robots, and the substitution rate for those was about 3.3 for each robot substituted for 3.3 people. Mm-hmm. So anyway, you start multiplying this stuff and it could be quite significant. But final thing is, it doesn't just need to be substitution. I mean, this is obviously augmentation as well. So your parents might not be, this is substituting your time rather than substituting you. And so they basically get an extra service to help them potentially stay in their homes and be freer for longer.
Yeah, I don't think they want to see me. All right, well, guys, hang with me. We're going to go off for a quick break. We'll be right back here on Opening Bid. All right, welcome back to Opening Bid. Talking to Rob Garlick and Wenyan Fei over at Citi Global Insights. Really fascinating work on humanoids, the future of humanoids, how I may have one that take care of my aging parents, how they might make less minimum wage. I mean, this is, what else more can you ask for from a robot? But let's talk some names, gents. Let's start with the name that is top of mind on the Yahoo Finance platform. That's Tesla, Elon Musk. It's Optimus robot. What do you think about this robot? How many do you think they could produce, Wenyan? And do you see them as the market leader at this point?
Well, I think in terms of making the noise, making the headlines in the market, definitely, I think they are sort of perceived as the leader. But as we identify, there are like 50, 60 different players in the market, and they are all making progress towards production. But just in terms of like, because these things, like to put them into production is quite expensive, especially if you want to build the production line for them in terms of the capital that they are available to deploy. Maybe Tesla Optimus is one of the is definitely one of the leaders for the market. And I think like in recent launch event, you see those videos of those Optimus robots doing the butler and entertaining people. They're already quite intelligent. I feel like well, they've already got the prototype, but they need to put them into mass production. In terms, well, I think Elon Musk was talking about several thousand to be in its gigafactory starting from 2025, and then maybe ultimately the substitution rate would be like even higher for factory settings to replace those factory workers within the Tesla factory.
Do you think Musk is correct when he says that we may own one of these Tesla robots? Like they will be some form of assistant to us long before not. And then secondarily, how complicated is it to make an Optimus robot? I'm trying to think, can he pump out millions of these each year at the same time they're trying to also make cars that drive by themselves?
Well, I think it's really depending on the demand of those humanoid robots. Although they are very good, and I'm totally convinced that they can make you a cup of tea, doing the laundries, mopping the floor, and taking care of your parents at home. I'm totally convinced. But the problem is that they're not very cheap. Like I think originally he was talking about 20,000, but now he is inflating the price to 25, 30,000. So the cost of these things are really a barrier for the people to like. You certainly want one assistant in your home, but like if it's 25, 30,000, then probably you might think twice about that. I think the price is one of the issue that they need to solve. But I totally, if there's a demand, if they can drive the price down. Firstly, would be the rich people buying it, and then if they can drive the price down, then seeing more demand, maybe they can produce mailings definitely in the future, but not right now.
Rob, interestingly, you guys correctly put out in this report, like literally the faces of these robots, the specs on what they do. As you were doing this research, what other companies in this space really impressed you, and what are they doing that led you to be impressed?
So yeah, the surprise was there's so many, and then when you start picking different bits, who is good at speed, who is good at carrying, who is good at vision, who is the degrees of freedom. I mean, there's a great variant, to be honest with you. I think one of the surprises is how developed this is in China. And there are leading companies in China, such as Unitree, which are already out on the market at essentially $14,000. So, you're talking with Wenyan there about, Tesla. And by the way, we're looking at long-term thematics. We're not talking about stock recommendations. It's not what we do. But, the Tesla Optimus and even Figure AI and those things, they're not yet out, and they're not yet commercial, and they haven't yet been proven. And I think one of the things, just to make sure I caveat all of your listeners on this, is that, when we're modeling out, although we get to 648 million by 2050, we only get to 13 million by 2035. So, we were trying to make sure we are sensible in the same way that autonomous vehicles got talked about, a decade ago. And it's only now that the inflection up is happening post the approval in San Francisco and Waymo doing 100,000 rides per week. So but however, when I say that, the development is taking place at a rapid pace in China. And if you look at the patents, for example, then China dominates this space. If you look at the production scale that they potentially have, if you look at the costs that are already there. So I think one of the conclusions is this is certainly not just a US story. This is going to be a story that happens in several different geographies.
Rob, aren't there two powerful trends underlying this move to humanoids? I'm looking at some of my notes here. I mean, we have slowing population growth around the world. We have an aging population growth around the world as well.
Yeah, and actually, there's another one I would put in there, which is obviously there's a shortage in certain labor areas. I mean, getting carers is not always easy. Getting carers that stay with people is not always easy. And so, when you look at shortages of staff, that's an obvious reason why there's a demand to plug in humanoids and other robots in other forms. The aging demographics is clearly an issue. And actually, what we modeled in terms of people getting older and the needs for people, say, for example, in the care industry, the demands will be very substantial. So, and, we came out, I mean, we haven't talked about it yet, but we came out actually very positive on the fact that these things can be, a chauffeur, a butler, a carer for people. And I think most people would sign up to have that type of service provided to them.
In the last 3 minutes of the show, guys, we always like to get our hot takes from our guests. Since I have two of you here, I will come to each of you on a different one. Wenyan, let me go to you for a hot take. What did you think about Sophia the robot?
I think it's quite interesting that they can do the thing they can do right now. But like, I just want to add a sentence in terms of hot take to our $7 trillion market size, is that if you look at the global GDP is above 100 trillion, and if you look at it at the 2050 is above 200 trillion, and then we're talking about the potential of these humanoid robots substituting 40% of the workforce. So it's definitely going to be huge. 7 trillion is not a big number compared to this, and we are also capturing the unvalued domestic workforce that is not included in the GDP. So 7 trillion is actually that doesn't sound that big if you can compare to these numbers.
Rob, over to you for a hot take. Do you see these humanoids entering the military?
Well, we didn't model a number of different areas, going into safety areas like fires and stuff like that. Security could be a big one, and then military as well. And we didn't model them because, candidly, it's quite difficult to get to those numbers. And I think that's a whole nother report at a potential another time. But I do think if you take the opportunity set, you're already seeing things like robo-dogs going into the front line. And some of these robo-dogs who can carry gear, they cost like $7,000. I mean, not necessarily expensive, and they're saving lives and doing great things. But then you take that to, can humanoids say the same things? The answer is, I think it's something that should be discussed in society about whether this is the right thing to do or not. The EU AI Act does a lot, but it doesn't include military.
I mean, the robo-dog seems safe. I mean, nothing like a pooch coming, going into battle, carrying some gear. I mean, that makes sense. I don't know about a humanoid, packing some heat, but I mean, how hard to argue with a humanoid Fido? Makes sense to me. How'd you guys get on this beat in the minute that we have left? How'd you guys start covering this stuff?
Well, we got lucky, being able to look at lots of areas of innovation. Artificial intelligence, obviously huge. We were writing about that, writing about agents, writing about quantum computing, and we got the opportunity to look at robots. And when we peeled back the cover, we found out there was just more and more. And so the innovation taking place in this space is very significant. And I think it can be a really big opportunity for society and people. But at the same time, there are a number of downsides, whether you want to talk about military, want to talk about the future of work. And we need to make sure that those conversations are being had.
Among the many things I learned from both of you in this chat, one, my aging parents are going to be taken care of by robots. Sounds more cost effective to me and just frankly easier in my life. And then I think the world needs a robo-dog. Really fascinating here analysis from you guys. Looking forward to continuing to follow your work on this category. Rob Garlick and Wenyan Fei from Citi Global Insights. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, and that's it.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. That's it for the latest episode of Opening Bid. Hit us with those 5 stars on Spotify, likes or thumbs up on YouTube, and keep on showing us that love on Apple Music. We feel it. We feel that appreciation. It keeps us going for many, many more episodes to come. We'll talk to you soon.